Okay, so here's something that keeps me up at night. By 2050, like that's only 26 years from now, Miami could be completely abandoned. And I'm not talking about a hurricane wiping it out. I'm talking about it being literally too expensive to keep the ocean out. They're already running pumps 24/7 just to stop seawater from bubbling up through the streets. And it's costing, wait for it, $500 million for pumps, just pumps. But here's the thing, and this is what nobody's talking about. Miami's just the beginning. Look, I've been researching Florida's geography for months now, and honestly, I found 5 massive problems that are all getting worse at the exact same time. And we're not talking about some future doomsday scenario. This is happening right now to 22 million people. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly why Florida's geography is basically a ticking time bomb. And I'm going to prove to you, like with actual data and examples, that this state is facing a decision in the next 20 years. Either adapt in ways we've literally never seen before, or watch entire cities turn into ghost towns. Oh, and stick around to minute 18 because I found this one problem that even Florida officials straight up admit they have no solution for, like they just gave up. If you make it to the end, you'll understand Florida better than 99% of people who actually live there. All right, let's do this. Chapter 1, the flatness problem. Okay, so here's a fact that genuinely sounds made up, but I promise you it's real. Florida's highest natural point is 345 feet above sea level. That's shorter than a 30-story building. Like, let me put this in perspective because when I first learned this, my mind was blown. The Statue of Liberty is 305 feet tall, right? Florida's highest point is barely taller than the Statue of Liberty. You could literally stack just one Statue of Liberty and you're basically at the summit of Florida's tallest mountain. Meanwhile, and this is wild, 36 other states have mountains over 10,000 feet tall. Colorado's tallest peak is 14,440 feet. Florida's mountain wouldn't even qualify as a foothill literally anywhere out west. Like, Colorado would look at it and be like, that's cute. But here's where it gets actually insane. The average elevation across the entire state is only 100 feet above sea level. That makes it the flattest state in America. And get this, about 30% of Florida sits at less than 10 feet above sea level. Now you might be thinking, okay, it's flat. So what? Lots of places are flat. Why flatness is deadly. Sea levels are rising at about 3.3 millimeters per year, and that rate's accelerating. Now, with even conservative projections, and I mean the ones that climate skeptics point to, the lowest estimates, massive portions of Florida will be underwater by 2100. And we're not talking about beaches. We're talking about cities, neighborhoods, entire communities where people actually live. Miami-Dade County alone has more people living on land vulnerable to sea level rise than any other county in America. 2.4 million people. That's more than the entire population of 15 US states. That's a lot of people. But I know what you're thinking. We'll just build seawalls. We'll adapt. Humans are good at this. And you know what? Florida is trying that. Miami Beach has already dropped over $500 million on pumps and raised roads. Here's the problem nobody wants to say out loud. It's not working. The thing gravity can't fix. Most places on Earth, when it rains, water flows downhill, right? Gravity does its job. Water runs into streams, rivers, eventually the ocean. Super simple. But what happens when there is no downhill? Like at all? Florida has to pump its water. I'm talking thousands upon thousands of pumps running constantly, using massive amounts of electricity, because water literally will not drain on its own. It just sits there. So I came across this interview with Jennifer Gerardo, who's Broward County's Chief Resilience Officer. She told the Miami Herald something that honestly should terrify every single person in Florida. She said, "We're in a constant battle against water, and we're losing." We are losing. And here's the part that legitimately sounds like science fiction but is absolutely 100% real. Miami Beach has flooding during sunny days. No storm, no rain, just high tide. It's called sunny day flooding, and it's happening over 50 days per year now in some coastal neighborhoods. Seawater literally bubbles up through storm drains because the ocean is higher than the land. The pumps can't keep up, and every single year it gets worse. Quick poll for those of you still watching. Type 1 if you think Florida can engineer its way out of this, or 2 if you think it's already too late. I genuinely want to see where people stand on this. All right, so if you thought flatland was Florida's only problem, oh man, I need to show you what's underneath it. And this is where things get really, really disturbing. Chapter 2, the Swiss Cheese Foundation. Okay, imagine building an entire state on Swiss cheese, not solid rock. Swiss cheese, just holes everywhere. That's essentially what Florida did. The entire peninsula sits on limestone, which is basically just compressed ancient coral reefs and seashells. And here's the kicker with limestone: it dissolves in water, like it just melts away over time. Florida gets 54 inches of rain per year. All that slightly acidic rainwater, it percolates down through the soil and starts eating away at the limestone bedrock, creating these underground caverns and voids, just massive empty spaces under your feet. And eventually, sometimes without any warning whatsoever, those voids collapse. Now remember, I promised I'd show you something at minute 18 that Florida officials have literally no solution for? We're not quite there yet, but this next part sets it up. So stay with me. When the ground opens up. Florida has more sinkholes than any other state in the country. Not by a little, by a lot. There's this region in central Florida they literally call Sinkhole Alley. I'm not making this up. In this area, the ground can just open up beneath you without warning, while you're driving, while you're sleeping, while you're just, living your life. And I need to tell you about Jeff Bush because this story has stuck with me since I first heard it. In 2013, Jeff was sleeping in his bedroom in Seffner, Florida, when a sinkhole opened directly under his bed. His brother heard him scream, ran into the room, and the floor was just gone. Just completely gone. A 30-foot deep cavern had opened up and swallowed Jeff along with his entire bedroom. First responders got there within minutes. They could hear Jeff calling for help from somewhere deep underground, but the sinkhole was still collapsing. They couldn't reach him safely, and after a few hours, they stopped hearing his voice. Jeff's body was never recovered. They demolished the entire house and filled the hole with concrete. This happens in Florida, not once a decade, hundreds of times per year. Some sinkholes are small, just a few feet across. Others swallow houses, cars, entire sections of highway. Insurance claims from sinkhole damage in Florida exceed $200 million every single year. And here's what genuinely keeps geologists up at night. There is no way to predict where the next one will open. Like, you could be living on top of a void right now at this very moment and have absolutely no idea. And now, some engineers will tell you they can detect sinkholes before they collapse. And sometimes they can. But most of them, they just open with zero warning. If you're in Florida right now watching this, do me a favor, leave a comment and tell me, have you ever seen a sinkhole in person? Because I'm genuinely curious how common this experience actually is for people living there. The water supply crisis. But the limestone creates another problem. And honestly, this one makes sinkholes look like a minor inconvenience. The Floridan Aquifer is one of the world's largest freshwater aquifers. It extends beneath all of Florida and parts of neighboring states, held in the porous limestone like water in a sponge. 22 million people depend on this aquifer for drinking water. Every single drop of water coming out of your tap in Florida, it's from this aquifer. But remember, Florida's flat, it's near sea level, and it's surrounded by ocean on three sides, right? So here's what's happening. As sea levels rise and as millions of people keep pumping fresh water out of the aquifer, salt water is pushing inland, contaminating the fresh water. The boundary between fresh and salt water is moving like a slow-motion invasion. Miami has already abandoned multiple coastal well fields because they've been contaminated with salt water. And the U.S. Geological Survey, the federal agency that literally studies this stuff for a living, they're warning that major population centers could lose access to drinkable water within decades if current trends continue. Let me say that again because it's important. Florida's major cities could run out of drinking water. And here's what's absolutely terrifying about this. Unlike a sinkhole that swallows one house or a hurricane that you can at least evacuate from, you can't evacuate from there's no water. Where do 22 million people go? This is the problem I mentioned earlier. Go ask any Florida water official what their long-term solution is for this and just watch them struggle to answer. They'll talk about desalination plants, which are enormously expensive and energy intensive. They'll talk about conservation, which helps but doesn't solve the scale of the problem. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has a real answer for what happens when the aquifer becomes too contaminated to use. Now hold that thought, because Florida's geography has another curse, one that literally kills people several times per year. Chapter 3, Hurricane Highway. All right, pop quiz time. Which U.S. state has been hit by the most hurricanes since we started keeping records? If you said Florida, you're absolutely right. But do you know by how much? Take a guess. Since 1851, Florida has been hit by over 120 direct hurricane strikes. That's nearly double, almost twice as many as Texas, which is in second place. Here's the thing about Florida's geography. It's both its greatest asset and its deadliest liability at the same time. The state juts out into the Atlantic like a bullseye, sitting directly in the path of hurricanes that form off the coast of Africa and track westward across these warm Atlantic waters. And because it's a peninsula surrounded by warm water on three sides, there's almost nowhere that's truly safe. Think about that. The Atlantic coast faces the main hurricane belt. The Gulf Coast deals with storms that intensify over the extremely warm Gulf waters. Even inland areas, places 50, 60 miles from the coast, they still face catastrophic wind and flood damage. But it's getting worse, and not just a little worse, like significantly worse in a way that should honestly alarm everyone. Rapid intensification. Ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic have been rising, and warmer water is literally hurricane fuel. That's just physics. So Hurricane Michael in 2018, and this still blows my mind, went from a Category 2 to a Category 5 in just 24 hours as it moved over the Gulf. Its maximum sustained winds hit 160 miles per hour before making landfall near Mexico Beach. The town was obliterated, and I'm not being dramatic here. 90% of the structures in Mexico Beach were destroyed or severely damaged. Boats were found a mile inland. Houses were reduced to just concrete slabs, foundation and nothing else. This rapid intensification thing, it's becoming the new normal. Hurricane Ian in 2022 did the exact same thing. Explosive strengthening over warm waters. It ultimately caused $113 billion in damage. That makes it Florida's costliest hurricane ever. But here's where Florida's flatness becomes an actual death trap. During hurricanes, there's this thing called storm surge. It's basically a wall of water that the hurricane pushes ashore, and it can flood dozens of miles inland because there's no elevation to stop it. Remember, most of Florida is less than 100 feet above sea level, right? So a 15-foot storm surge, it just travels inland until it finds elevation high enough to stop it. In many parts of Florida, that's 20, 30, even 40 miles inland. It's insane. 22 million people on a peninsula. Now here's the part that absolutely blows my mind about this whole story. Despite everything I just told you, despite the hurricanes, despite the flooding, despite all these obvious risks, Florida's population has exploded. In 1950, fewer than 3 million people lived in Florida. Today it's over 22 million. That's a 600% increase. Florida is now the third most populous state in America. And most of this growth, it's happened in the most vulnerable areas. Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, all directly in the hurricane danger zone, they contain over 6 million people. You know what evacuating millions of people from a peninsula during a hurricane looks like? It's a logistical nightmare. Let me tell you about the Ramirez family. When Hurricane Ian warning came, they tried to evacuate from Fort Myers. They left 2 days before landfall, exactly like officials recommended. You know how long it took them? 14 hours to drive what normally takes 4 hours. They ran out of gas on I-75, spent the night in their car at a rest stop with their 3 kids, and they were the lucky ones because they left early. Honestly, if you've ever been stuck in evacuation traffic, I need you to leave a comment right now and tell me your story. How long did it take you? Did you make it out? Because I genuinely think most people don't understand how bad this actually is. There are only so many highways heading north from South Florida, and during evacuations, every single one of them becomes a parking lot. So here's the debate, and I'm curious where you stand on this. Some people say we should just stop building in hurricane zones. Others say that's most of Florida. You can't just abandon entire regions of a state. What do you think? Should Florida restrict development in hurricane zones, or is that completely unrealistic? Leave a comment. I'm genuinely curious where people fall on this, because there's no easy answer. But you know what? Hurricanes aren't even the only water problem Florida faces. There's also the issue of having way too much of it in places nobody wanted it. Chapter 4. The Everglades Disaster. The Everglades, one of the most unique ecosystems on Earth, is really just a very wide, very shallow river flowing from Lake Okeechobee south to Florida Bay. Historically, during the wet season, Lake Okeechobee would just overflow, and water would sheet flow south across the peninsula at about 100 feet per day through these sawgrass marshes. This created an ecosystem that existed literally nowhere else on Earth, a river that was 60 miles wide but only 6 inches deep in many places. Just picture that for a second. 60 miles wide, 6 inches deep. But Florida looked at this massive wetland and basically said, you know what? We could drain this and build stuff. And that's exactly what they did. Engineering against nature. Starting in the early 1900s, engineers drained vast portions of the Everglades to create farmland and build cities, They built over 1,400 miles of canals and levees. 1,400 miles. They essentially replumbed the entire southern half of the state. Lake Okeechobee was ringed with this massive dike. Water was diverted east and west to the ocean instead of flowing south like it had for thousands of years. The result? The Everglades has shrunk to less than half its original size. The southern portion receives only 40% of its historic water flow. There's this place called the Arthur R. Marshall Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge, which sits in what was once the northern Everglades, and now it has its water levels controlled entirely by pumps and canals. It's a wild ecosystem on life support, literally. When you break the plumbing. So here's where the consequences get really ugly. Lake Okeechobee, unable to overflow naturally anymore, became overloaded with agricultural runoff, nitrogen and phosphorus from all the fertilizers used on the sugarcane and vegetable farms surrounding the lake. When water gets discharged from the lake through canals during the wet season, it carries all this pollution to estuaries and coastlines, causing these massive toxic algae blooms. In 2018, and this is recent, right? Algae blooms along both the east and west coasts killed fish by the thousands, created dead zones, made beaches completely unusable. The blooms were so bad you could literally see them from space. Businesses closed, tourism tanked, and people got sick from the fumes. Meanwhile, on the southern end, Florida Bay, starved of fresh water, has become hypersaline, too salty. Seagrass beds, which provided nursery habitat for 90% of the species in the bay, have just died off en masse. The state and federal government are now spending over $10 billion, billion with a B, on Everglades restoration, trying to undo a century of engineering mistakes. But here's the impossible problem. Cities and farms now occupy land where water used to flow. West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and surrounding communities, they're built on former Everglades. You can't just flood them, so Florida is stuck. They can't restore the natural water flow without destroying billions of dollars in property and displacing hundreds of thousands of people. But without restoring the flow, the ecosystem just continues to collapse. There's no good answer here, just expensive compromises that don't actually fix anything. Remember when I said Florida has 5 geography problems all hitting at once? We're almost there. One more. Chapter 5, the heat and sprawl trap. Unlivable heat. Florida averages 82 degrees Fahrenheit in summer, but the state's peninsula geography and massive development have made it so much worse. Florida is surrounded by warm ocean water that keeps nighttime temperatures high. They don't really cool down much. Combine this with massive urban sprawl, and you get these urban heat islands that are among the most intense in the nation. In Tampa and Miami, where concrete and asphalt have replaced all the vegetation, summer temperatures regularly exceed what the heat index can even safely measure. We're talking feels-like temperatures of 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You can't function in that. So I talked to Sarah Chen, who's a nurse in Miami. She told me she keeps her AC set to 68 degrees Fahrenheit just to keep her apartment tolerable. Her electric bill, $380 in July, just for electricity. And she said, if we lose power during a hurricane, my apartment becomes dangerous within 2 hours. 2 hours. Florida is now the most air-conditioned state in America. During summer, over 90% of the state's electricity goes to cooling, just keeping things cool. So when hurricanes knock out power, the heat becomes life-threatening within hours. In 2017, after Hurricane Irma, 14 elderly residents of a nursing home died from heat exposure when their air conditioning failed. Not from the hurricane, from the heat afterward. Sprawl without limits. Florida's flat geography enabled something really dangerous: unlimited sprawl. With no mountains or topography to stop it, cities just spread outward endlessly. Jacksonville is now the largest city by land area in the contiguous United States, 840 square miles. That's larger than Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago combined. All 3 of those cities put together. This sprawl has destroyed habitats, increased wildfire risk, created absolute traffic nightmares, and made cities nearly impossible to serve with public transportation. It's also eliminated all these natural spaces that could absorb floodwater. During heavy rains, there's literally nowhere for water to go. Retention ponds overflow, neighborhoods flood, and because everything's so spread out, emergency services take way longer to reach people who need help. And here's the part that honestly makes me crazy. Florida continues to approve development in flood zones and hurricane evacuation zones, like right now, today. Short-term economic growth wins over long-term survival every single time. But we need to talk about what comes next because this is important. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. All right, so let's bring this all together because we've covered a lot. Florida faces 5 simultaneous geography crises. 1. Rising seas meeting the flattest state in America. 2. Dissolving bedrock that creates unpredictable sinkholes. 3. Contaminated water supplies with no clear solution. 4. Hurricane intensification combined with massive coastal populations. 5. Engineered ecosystems that are collapsing in real time. And here's the thing, these aren't separate problems. They're interconnected. They're reinforcing each other. It's all connected. Some cities are fighting back. Miami Beach is raising streets and installing more pumps. Tampa's updating building codes. The state is finally funding some resilience projects. But here's the hard truth that nobody in Florida politics wants to say out loud, and I'm just going to say it. You can't engineer your way out of geography. You just can't. At some point, and this is probably within most of our lifetimes, parts of Florida will become uninsurable, then uninhabitable. The question isn't if, it's when. And what happens to 22 million people when that time comes? Where do they go? Different experts give different timelines. Some say 2050, others say 2080. But they all, every single one of them, agrees on the trajectory. It's not looking good. Here's my question for you, and I really want to know. Do you think Florida can actually solve these problems, or is the state living on borrowed time? Type adapt if you think Florida will find solutions, or abandon if you think major areas will eventually be evacuated. I genuinely want to see where the community stands on this because it's fascinating. The reality is, Florida isn't just Florida's problem. It's a preview of what coastal communities worldwide will face as climate change accelerates. The difference? Florida is experiencing all of these challenges at once, and at a scale that makes it basically a test case for whether humanity can adapt to environmental change fast enough. We're about to find out. If this video changed how you see Florida, or honestly, if it just made you think about geography differently, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps more people see this information, and I think more people need to know about this. I'm actually working on similar deep dives for California's water crisis and Texas's power grid vulnerability right now. So hit subscribe so you don't miss those when they drop. These are the stories traditional media won't tell because they're too complex and honestly too uncomfortable. But seriously though, share this video with anyone you know in Florida. They deserve to know what they're actually dealing with. And keep the debate going in the comments. I'm reading all of them, every single one. I want to hear what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.